Hello and welcome to lesson 18. In this lesson you'll learn how Kickstart can be used to make installing RHEL 7 easier. After discussing the different scenarios how Kickstart can be used, you'll learn how to create a Kickstart configuration file and how to use such a file for automated installations. We'll also go a bit beyond the things you have to know to pass the RHCSA test and discuss how Kickstart can be used to set up automated data centers. As always, this lesson is concluded with an exercise and a brief summary. So the purpose of using Kickstart is to provide the settings that normally you would provide during installation, but automatically. So Kickstart is using a Kickstart file. And this Kickstart file you need to put it somewhere that it is available during the installation. So we have the installation process that starts, for example, by using the boot.iso file, which is the minimal installation ISO image. So when doing the installation, normally you are prompted for everything that the system needs to know. But what you would do is provide an argument like a ks equals myks.cfg, for example, in which myks.cfg is the name of the Kickstart file. In order to do that, you must make sure that the Kickstart file is available. You could use USB keys to do that, or you could use a server to do that. So the next thing is that the Kickstart file is read, and based on the settings in the Kickstart file, the installation can continue. And that can be either from a local installation DVD, if you have the full Red Hat Enterprise Linux installation DVD, or it can be by using a repository server, in which the repository server is providing access to all packages that need to be installed. And that is basically the idea of how the installer, the Kickstart file, and if needed, the repository server are used together to provide for an automated installation. And that means that as an administrator, you can just start the installation by using the Kickstart file, and you can go home and the next day it will be finished. Later in this lesson, you will see how easy it is to use Kickstart to do automated installations.
If you need to install just one server, well, just install it. If you need to install dozens of servers, you don't want to go through all the same configuration settings again. And that is what you want to use Kickstart for. So Kickstart is a configuration file that can be passed to the installer while installing a server. If you go to the home directory of user root on an installed server, you will see two different Kickstart files, which is anaconda-ks.cfg and initial setup ks.cfg. If you have a look at it, you can recognize the options that you've used during installation. Like, we want to do shadow-based authentication. We want to install from a CD-ROM. We only want to use SCA. We want to use English, and so on and so on. It is not that difficult to recognize the options that you have used. So the idea is that, well, the next installation you could use a file like this. If this file isn't entirely the way you want it to be, then you can manually adjust it, or you can create a completely new file on your own. To do that, you need systemconfig Kickstart, a utility which isn't installed by default. Fortunately, it's in a package with the name systemconfig Kickstart, so that isn't too hard to remember. Let's install it and let's have a look at it. The interesting thing about systemconfig Kickstart is that it seems the only utility on RHEL 7 that hasn't been updated. And that means that the package does have some problems. So the good thing is that it offers you a nice menu-driven interface from which you can tune the entire configuration. The bad thing is that we need some essential information, like the option to create LVM in here. But otherwise you can add network devices, authentication, firewall, and you can do anything you like from the Kickstart configurator. Once you're done, you will select File Save, which saves the Kickstart file to your system. Of course, there is one thing that can make it difficult. Let's go back to system config Kickstart again, and that is pre-installation script and post-installation script. This is what makes Kickstart really powerful. You can have a script executed before or after starting the Kickstart based installation, which makes sure that your system will be entirely prepared to do what exactly it has to do. So the thing with Kickstart is that you want to use it to do automated installations. So let's do a little demo about that. First, I'm going to modify a little bit of my anaconda-ks.cfg, because I want the host name, which is in there somewhere. There it is. I don't want it to specify a host name, so let's just take that out. And then the root password, well, everything else is kind of okay. Now what you should know here is that if there's information missing, the installer will ask me anyway. So I need to publish this information to a location where I can access it later. And as I have my nice little server, I'm using scp-uppercase P 2022 of the file anaconda-ks.cfg to sender at server.rhatcertification.com, and let's put it in my home directory. Yes, I want to continue, and this is my password. So once it is on the server, my server runs an FTP server as well, and I want the Kickstart file to be available on the FTP server. That means that I need to go to my server, so sshp2022 sender at server.rhatcertification.com. And I need to become a root. So there we are. So from home sender I should find my Anaconda Kickstart file, and I'm going to copy that to the FTP document root. So that's var FTP pub. And let's go to var FTP pub and check the contents where we see the Anaconda ks.cfg. I need to make sure that we have the appropriate permissions, because this isn't going to work. So chmod 644 on Anaconda kickstart.cfg. We need to read for others, otherwise the file cannot be accessed. And just to make sure, systemctl status vs ftpd, I've got my FTP server running here. So let's get out of here and let's see how we can use it. Oh, and I will keep it on my server. So if you want to try this procedure, you're more than welcome to do so. So I started the installation from my DVD here, and this is where I stopped the installer, and I need to press the tab key for additional options. So what we need is a ks equals followed by the location of my Kickstart file. So that would be server.rhatcertification.com /pub/anaconda-ks.cfg. So do you see that? It is automatically starting the installation. The root password has been set and a user with the name user will be created. And I didn't enter anything. That is Kickstart. Now isn't that cool? Of course, if you want to install an automated data center, you don't want to start from the installation disk, but you want to set up an installation server as well. But setting up an installation server is beyond the scope of this lesson.
To use Kickstart in a fully automated data center, you need a full-blown installation server. This is not an RHCSA exam topic, but it's nice to know how it works anyway. So let's have a look. So install that you have your installation server and there's a server you want to install. The process would be that the server you want to install is doing a PXE boot. That means that it is booting from the network card and there is some server waiting for it. And that would be the installation server. On the installation server there would be a DHCP server together with a TFTP server. DHCP, which is handing over an IP address, and TFTP, which is handing over an installation image. That is the boot image that goes from the installation server to the server you want to install. And then the installer can load. So that's the installation program where normally you would enter all the details about which server name, which file system layout and so on. But we don't want to do that, so the installer needs to be configured to get a Kickstart file. And that would be the file that is on a web server, for example. So the installer gets a URL like http somewhere ks.cfg, which is the name of the Kickstart file. So the installation server gives the Kickstart file, which means that the server you are installing knows everything that you want to do. So the installation can start. And the final part of all this is that the installation program needs access to a repository. And that repository is something that needs to be configured on an installation server as well. And this is basically what a full-blown installation server would look like. So let's do the exercise. This exercise isn't really complicated. I would like you to modify the anaconda-ks.cfg file to meet the following requirements. First, the installer needs to prompt for a password. The network connectivity must be enabled on boot, and the local machine name is set to server1.example.com.
So the exercise asks to make some modifications to the anaconda-ks.cfg file. Let's open it. And it needs to meet the following requirements. So the installer prompts for a root password. So here we've got the root password, and if we remove it, the installer will ask for a root password. Then we need network connectivity. You can see that here already we have network boot proto equals DHCP. So it will go to a boot to a DHCP server. And we need to modify the name of the machine we want to install. So let's set that to server1.example.com. This, by the way, is something that you can very easily delegate to a DHCP server. You can configure a DHCP server to hand out host names on installation as well. And this is basically all that you needed to do for this exercise.
And this brings us to the end of lesson 18, where you've learned how to modify a Kickstart file. Please do remember that in this lesson I explained a little bit beyond the exam topics. What you really need to know for the exam is how to modify a Kickstart file so that it will do whatever you need it to do during installation. So the part where we looked at system config Kickstart was important, even if it's a limited utility, and also the part where we edited the Kickstart file manually was important. Make sure you master these skills before going to the exam.